Birdly hello, and yeah, nice to be talking to you. Um, Very nice. Uh, and I'm sorry I've been unavailable virtually all of today. I've been catching up necessarily on some sleep, and we keep missing each other. Um, and needless to say, I've got 100 things to say to you at the moment, but I won't say them in public here. They're not private, they're just not particularly relevant to what I want to read at the moment, which is the continuation of Crow Country. So I'll just get on with that. I think this is the third instalment. And I'm going to be a drama queen, because it's chapter 2 that we are due to start, and my reason for being dramatic is that it's all about the author's traumatic house move. And yeah, for reasons I don't particularly want to disclose here. Nothing mysterious. I'm sorry, I am being dramatic, but that's a very sore subject. So the whole of chapter 2 is about that. He's gone to, I think he's moved to near Norwich. Okay. And as you probably guess from what he's written so far, he's very perceptive and emotional about it. So I am going to skip that whole chapter and start again on chapter 3, which is page 15 of a paperback. Very soon after our initial operations to make the Hollies habitable, we came to realize that we had forged a new relationship, not simply with the house, but with its entire surroundings. The setting had, of course, been a major reason for moving into the countryside in the first place. For me, the presence of a spotted flycatcher's nest in wisteria by the front door, and the sight of a marsh harrier directly overhead, at the very moment that I first crossed the threshold, were omens no naturalist could ignore. Yet our first memorable encounters with nature, after moving, were with what might call the great absences of the countryside. Darkness, darkness, silence, and stillness. In Norwich, as with any other city, there was always enough ambient nocturnal glow to negotiate the house's interior, without ever resorting to a light switch. But when the sun sets in the village, the loss of light can be total. At first I found it quite disconcerting to be lying in Mary's arms, Mary is his wife, Mary's arms, and not be able to see her, even when my face was inches away. This sense of disorientation in the bedroom is often amusing. Several times one of us has woken in the early hours to find the other fumbling for a door in entirely the wrong wall. It might sound strange, perhaps, but we love the darkness. We love even more its corollary, the vision of a night sky emblazoned with stars, or of a full moon looming over the garden. Sometimes we're so captivated, I set up the telescope to enjoy the mountains and craters, stippling the sphere's icy whiteness. Okay, and Dopey, he's obviously referring to the moon there. Took me a while to cotton on there. All of us are equally entranced by the silence and the stillness of the night. Like a heavy wooden door, they close behind us tightly on the affairs of the day, shutting out the unwanted intrusions. Mary says she feels the process begin even as she drives the 12 kilometers home back from work. Some of the pleasures associated with the Hollies' tranquility are very specific, such as the sound of owls after dark. Owls used to call near our home in Norwich, but they were always mingled with the background hum of traffic, the mumbling voices of next door's telly, or segments of conversation from people passing in the street. The wonderful birds still brought a touch of mystery to the city, but at the Hollies their hoots cut their sinuous way through the air with stiletto-like precision, and define the silence that enfolds them. It was some time before I began to make wider excursions into the surrounding landscape. There is a small man-made broad about 5 kilometers from the house, known as Hardley Flood. I used to go down in the early evening after work to watch the gulls gather to roost at dusk. The spillage of birds onto the site's shallow waters is really only a minor overflow from the much larger aerial movement that happens every afternoon across this part of the country. The gulls' eastward passage from all points of the compass is one of the great natural rituals at the end of the day, when their main destination is Breydon Estuary, about 15 kilometers downstream. My goal was to see if I could find something unusual among the gathering rafts of commonplace species. Success in this department was infrequent, but I loved the sense of liberation as I plodded down the track at the water's edge, the sun setting on my right, the raucous notes of gulls drifting off the broad to my left, while overhead a handful of late house martins and swallows seemed embalmed briefly in the warm, midge-filled autumn air. Part of the intense pleasure of these excursions, which became a fixed part of the weekly routine in those first months of moving, was the sense that all this was on my doorstep. It was my new territory. I could be writing in the office, and 10 minutes later I could be out in an elemental world of water and sky. The proximity of a natural landscape had been carefully considered when we made the decision to move. Since I write about nature and wildlife, such a habitat was my own kind of workspace. Yet the feelings that I encountered as I made my way down to Hadley Flood, and more often as I walked back to the car, with dusk blossoming all around, was far more than simply the pleasure of convenience. Equally, the sense of elation seemed out of all proportion to the landscape around me, or to the experience it afforded. Hardly is a modest fragment of the Broad's environment, eclipsed entirely by more famous sites to the north. I found myself pondering on the real reason for these tremendous feelings of well-being. And if you don't mind, I'll pause there, because that's wonderful, and it seems to have come to a natural conclusion there. And I will do more of that whenever. Thank you very much for listening to Ovid, if you did. I think yes, you did, sorry. I'm sorry that the sound quality was inadequate. Did I already say that? I did. Oh well. I did say sorry. Alright, I'll stop saying sorry, and I will now just go. I hope we're in touch soon. Bye bye.